Hi, welcome to Who Dares Rolls. I'm Charlie Etheridge Nunn, and it's been a little while since you've last seen me. We're in December now, hence the half-assed attempt at decorating my office, and we're in the brief couple of hour window where there's any natural light that can be filmed in, as my office light sadly flickers a bit too much to be able to video it in any kind of good quality. So, Dragonmeet happened. This is the first time since, March 2020 I've been to a real, actual in-person convention. It was a joy to go to. It was weird. I think most of my conversations, most of my small talk with people was, oh God, there are so many people around. This is so weird, isn't it? Luckily, I think everyone was in that same boat. I was a bit back and forth on whether or not to go. I know Mike was as well, and he ended up veering on the not going. One of my oldest friends, Graham, my first GM, didn't go because it would have involved a lot of travel, staying in a hotel, all of that, as well as the convention itself. For me, it was easy enough as just a short day trip up there. I figured I wouldn't go into any of the seminars. I wouldn't take part in any of the RPGs just because, safety and proximity and all of that. Everyone was masked, which was wonderful. So it was more a case of just having a bit of a saunter around the trade hall, catching up with some people, that sort of thing. So yeah, that in itself was, again, bit delirious, bit interesting to do, and even though I was only there for a couple of hours really, it was a real joy. The last convention I went to was Aircon last year, and that was just on the cusp as things were looking like everyone was going to be locking down any moment. So yeah, it was an interesting experience to see. The queue to get in wasn't that crazy, or at least my partner and I intercepted it just before a batch of people showed up. I think we must have arrived about 10ish, maybe a little after 10. So I think other people were also trying to be fashionably late in attending. The top hall for it had a lot of the traditional stalls there. So Modiphius and Cubicle 7, who are some of the more ubiquitous UK role-playing companies and have a million different licenses there. It was great seeing them all set up. There was Free League up there as well. I only had small amounts of time with each of them. I did get to see Bez, friend of the channel, I'd like to say, and even though I only had a brief bit of a catch up with her about everything and got to gush a bit about wee whimsical creatures, which I managed to get a game of in at CabinCon, I also got to play a demo of a game about quickly grabbing creatures that are totally different and watching out for turnips. I love unnecessarily long games. It was manic, stupid. It was an interesting one. I thought watching out for turnips would be because turnips bad. Turns out turnips are all right. They're quite useful. And even though it's a game played only in a couple of minutes where you scatter cards onto a table and start manically, collectively all trying to find monsters that look different from one another, and then using turnips to kind of safely buffer whatever creature you had and whatever creature you next get. So if they have similarities, it doesn't matter. Yeah, it was neat. So you can see here all of these, as ever, hand-drawn lovingly by Bez. These two have a similarity. They both have a cat head and a mermaid tail. This one, cat head. None of these could be placed next to each other unless you have turnip. So yeah, short, sweet, very good fun, and with some compliment cards from the Kickstarter for Wee Whimsical Creatures. So yeah, that was nice. There were a few interesting oddities on that haul as well. You had a lot of craft-based items, things like little role-playing accoutrements, notepads, all sorts of things. I'm being vague because there's something that's going to be a gift for a friend that I picked up, so I don't spoil that. There were even things like some interchangeable meeples from one company where you could remove the top half that was, say, an adventurer and put the top half that was a giant killer plant on there. It was weird, kind of cool, but still weird. Apparently they're going to be on Kickstarter next year for a new season based more around adventurers than monsters. So you'll be able to mix and match those. There was also some kind of card game about dragons, but what if they were dogs, but all kind of pug looking? Wasn't so keen on that, despite being a fan of dragons, fan of dogs. Combine them together, little ugly looking. So yeah, for me, the main place that I was at was the trade hall. A good friend of mine, W.H. Arthur, was manning an indie RPG stand with 5 others, and including a local game designer to Brighton, David Blandy, who created The World After, which was an RPG I only found out about because of an art gallery down here where it was being featured, which is a weird and neat crossover. So it was great seeing their stand, and I managed to pick up a couple of things from there. There was the Black Armada stand, which had a wonderfully central feeling place, or at least it was Black Armada, it was Sinister Beard, it was a bunch of different designers, all in the UK Indie RPG League. So with that lot, it's always a joy to chat to Josh Fox and Becky Annison. They were both looking well and selling a lot of the Patreon games that they've put together, like History Did Live, which is a game based on Time Team. I've run it a couple of times and it's a real joy. There was also Ollie Jeffrey from Sinister Beard Games, who designed Quietus, and that was cool. I'd only ever interacted with Ollie online before, so it was really nice actually getting to meet him in person, getting to have a bit of a chat about games, and yeah, managing to pick up a copy of Quietus, which I'll show off in a sec when I do my RPG show and tell. I went to the Rowan Reckon Deckard stall, which was manic. They were nearish the entrance, so you'd go in round Pelgrane Press, who are another one of the kind of slightly more tradish RPG big dog kind of companies in the UK. So nice to see all that. Very tempted by the Knights Black Agents books on there, because I've been reading the PDFs, and the Troy column layout is, I don't know what it is about them. I find them really difficult to engage with on a PDF. I find a printed page a lot easier for that. And watching Arthur try and resist the Yellow King. Something fell. I'm going to ignore it and carry on. So yes, once you got around there, you had Rowan Rook and Deckard, who were insanely busy. They had Honey Heist pins, they had Heart and Spire, a lot of their traditional books, but also Voidheart Symphony and Electric Bastionland, one of which I've read and run and loved. So it was really cool seeing how busy they were. There was only a brief moment for Grant to show off the Heart's Blood, like super special edition of Heart, to myself and my partner. So that was quite nice. There were a lot of other stands. It felt like there was a bit more of an indie representation there. Seeing a lot more games like Delve, a lot of solo journaling games. It was fascinating seeing that, and I don't know whether it's because there were fewer stands in general or more indies. I'm inclined to think the latter, especially seeing the stall that Arthur was part of as kind of a slightly newer collective showing up and taking part. So it was fantastic to see. Aside from that, I think that was pretty much it. My time there was cut short, partly because you run out of things to do if you're not taking part in any of the RPGs or any of the seminars or anything. And partly because my partner was originally intending to go to a Christmas market but got cancelled. So as she's not a role player, it felt like it'd be a bit weird having her kind of just stuck there going, what are all these things? Ooh, these dice are pretty. There are skulls all over the place, which is a big fan of skulls. You can see many up there. But yeah, I felt a bit bad about kind of dragging around there. So we left and had a bit of a day out in London. So RPG show and tell. This is exciting, and this is kind of skipping ahead a bit. I'll have another video for things which I've acquired and want to show off prior to Dragonmeet at a future date. So first of all, I was handed by Soul Muppet Publishing The Garden Most Foul. I don't have the Best Left Buried RPG, but it looks like a really interesting kind of micro hex crawl kind of thing. I love when you get these sorts of RPGs which are like adventures which can be done on just a booklet, which is really neat. Let's see, from the stall that Arthur was kind of co-running by Yanan, we have the Stories to Astonish the World. Now this was part of a jam that was put together when the Metropolitan Museum of Art, New York, opened up a lot of its art to go make use of it. So people did. And in this case, we have a slightly Lady Blackbird themed point crawl. Lady Blackbird, of course, we've reviewed on the site, is an amazing one of the best ways to teach people RPGs, one of the best kind of ways of just generating story instantly. And in this case, you have point by point different locations with different events and different things that can happen. Your characters have skills that can help them out. They have keys, which are kind of almost like experience point triggers. And you've got tables of complications and encounters. It's really neat, really light. I've been looking for a lot of things to get to the table for indie RPG nights that I've been running at Brighton's Dice Saloon. And this feels exactly like the kind of thing that I could get to the table there. Now, as a bonus for buying that, also got this lovely little booklet, which is the night market. And you fold it out, and it uses a Dyson Logos map as part of a jam involving their maps. And what's cool is, while it's a dungeon map, this isn't really a dungeon. It's a market where living and dead buy things. And it even has motivations for it. It sounds like it would be a really useful social encounter for any fantasy type RPG, and easily scaled or changed if you want a modern RPG in a kind of strange market or anything like that. I could see it quite easily modifying for that. Now, the last thing from their store is Manse, and this is Rooted in Trophy, which I'm sure I've raved enough times about Trophy. This is part of a trifold trophy jam. I realise I'm saying a lot about game jams because there are tons these days, and they're a really useful way of kicking off a lot of these sorts of things. So this is a trophy incursion about an old crumbling manor and what's inside it, and trying to claim a place while the place is also trying to claim you. Lovely. Let's see, trying to go upwards size-wise. I have a deck of cards for Bleak Spirit. Now, this is Dark Souls, but as a role-playing game. This uses the same system as Lovecraft-esque. Again, reviewed it on the site, both in video and probably in text. If not here in text, somewhere else I've reviewed it in text. It's a great game where you pass around a protagonist, pass around the kind of establishing roles. And this is a game that does very similar things, but with a wanderer through the world and someone playing the world, and then everyone else playing the chorus, and you switch around each scene, building lore, and eventually seeing whether or not you overcome an adversary. So I have the book, but only in PDF, and this is one of those games where I really wanted the props, the cards for it. So that's going to help me get that to the table at some point soon. Also, from the Indie League table, as that was, I bought a physical copy of Quietus. Now, I own a PDF of Quietus. I've read it a bunch of times, and I've got it on my bucket list for what to run RPG-wise for the last year. I haven't been able to. To be honest, I'm about halfway through that bucket list. It's not happening, not by, nearly mid-December. But this will help me get it to the table sooner in the future, and it's just a lovely book. It was signed by Ollie. Always nice to get a copy signed by someone. I know with Explosion High, I drew a lot of sharks in books, and yeah, it's all quite nicely and cleanly put together. It's a very small system, or at least it's a hack of Blades in the Dark. It's a boiled down version based around melancholy horror. As it says here, it's 3 a.m. There's someone in your house. They're going to kill you. Quietus is a one-shot, prepless RPG of melancholy horror. It's a game for a GM and 1 or 2 players, and emulates tragic horror movies like Oculus, The Strangers, The Babadook, Inside, and the Netflix version of Haunting of Hill House. If a piece of fiction can make you cry and scream, then it's a great model for the sort of stories that you can tell with Quietus. Powered by a stripped-down version of the award-winning Blades in the Dark engine, you'll create characters with tragic backstories and send them hurtling headlong into a nightmare where their past trauma may be the only thing that saves them. That, to me, sounds great. My partner was half asleep during the train ride back home and looking at me reading this and was like, that sounds awful. Who's going to play that with you? I can find players, but I totally get her, why would you want to play a game that upsets you, kind of thing. But yeah, it sounds like a fascinating story to tell. So I'm looking forward to giving that a go. And one for my list to run next year is Voidheart Symphony. This is by Mina McShander. It's a kind of Persona type RPG. It's a sequel to her game Rhapsody of Blood, which was very Castlevania. And in this case, there is a castle in the world. There are monsters that come from the castle, but this time the castle is fractured. It's kind of in a dream space. And you and your friends have 1 block of stats for when you're in the waking world. Try and find clues about where it is, who the antagonist is, why they're doing what they're doing, any kind of leads. And with that side of it, you have a stress track, which you're trying to roll 2d6 and get 1 or both of them over your current stress. However, when you enter the castle when you enter the dream space, it goes into a more powered by the apocalypse style. And with that, you venture through a strange castle using things like the labyrinth move, I think, first coined by Jason Cordova of the Gauntlet, and then expanded on and changed for games like this. And with that, you fight minions, but you have a kind of interesting boss battle kind of system. And this is fascinating because in games like D&D, for instance, there's not much of a difference between a regular fight and a boss fight. The boss might get more actions, might have more hit points, but here you are looking for openings, and those could be social openings. They could be exploiting cracks you've found from your research in the city. They could be literally taking a blow so that the villain has their back turned to you and someone else can dive in. And it's a fascinating game. For me, I was a massive Hunt for Reckoning fan back in the day, and even though the kind of modern attitude of Hunt for Reckoning has dated horrendously, it's still a really interesting way of mixing the mundane and the horrific. And this feels like it does the same sort of thing. And it's all got, let's see, really nice presentation. Mina's work in RPG design has always been great. But these last few years, she has been knocking it out of the park. Been able to see in games like Heart, in the Spire expansion Sin, in Lancer, all sorts of things. We have seen some amazing work. So, yeah, we have some nice games to try out. So that's it for me in Dragonmeet. Hopefully next year I'll be there and a bit more active. Josh Fox was trying to get me to promise to run some games for Indie Games on the Hour, which he was very flattering in saying about how I'm an extremely experienced GM, which, yes, I'm sadly very old as well as quite experienced with running games. But I guess the only concern I'd have with that is timekeeping, because these are 2-hour slots. Hopefully I'll be able to hone that down, and yeah, you might even see me running some games next December. So that's it for me in Dragonmeet. What's next for me on this channel? I have a review of the game Village Song, which is up there hidden behind some Christmas baubles, which will hopefully be out at some point in the near future. I have an unboxing of Final Girl, which I need to send over to Mike. That's Final Girl, the board game, not Final Girl, the role-playing game, although both are great. Personally, I'm going to try and learn a bit about editing videos myself, so I just give content to Mike, get him to edit it and fling it out. That way I can help with some of the workload for Who Dares Rolls. And I want to talk a bit about Yellow King, about Cabin Con, which is a mini convention that I attended in mid-November, and probably going to end up doing some end-of-year list things. Those always seem to go well. Until then, you can follow me on Twitter, where I'm at Charlie_EN. I'm Faked Tales on Instagram, and on both of those I mostly talk about indie RPGs and comics. A lot about comics, admittedly. For this channel, like it, subscribe, comment if you went to Dragonmeet. Tell me what you picked up, what you found fun there, and what you're hoping to do next year. Back us on Patreon, please. We have very few people on there. We love you all. And who knows, maybe I'll be able to get a better anything, better decks, better video equipment, and do some of this more often. And yeah, hopefully I'll see you in the very near future.